Let me read to you a passage from the 6th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 6 to 11. It's the Gospel for Monday of the 23rd week in Ordinary Time. St. Luke writes, "On another Sabbath Jesus went into the synagogue and was teaching, and a man was there whose right hand was shriveled. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus knew what they were thinking, and said to the man with the shriveled hand, 'Get up and stand in front of everyone.' So he got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, 'I ask you, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it?' He looked round at them all, and then said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' He did so, and his hand was completely restored. But they were furious and began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus." That's from Luke chapter 6, verses 6 to 11. What does it suggest to us? Well, it speaks of Jesus as the man of compassion. You know, it is always helpful to consider the various gospel accounts of the same event. At times there are almost identical textual accounts, but there are usually differences. For instance, Mark's account of the healing of the man with the withered hand in the synagogue, Mark chapter 3 verses 1 to 6, follows Christ's altercations with the scribes and Pharisees in the previous chapter, and in particular his disciples' disregard of certain Pharisaic prescriptions on the Sabbath rest. They were seen to be picking grain on the Sabbath. In like manner, Matthew has the event immediately following on the Pharisees' criticism of the disciples picking grain on the Sabbath. Their accounts of the picking of the grain are similar, though not identical, suggesting a reliance of one text on the other. In each, there then follows the account of the healing of the withered hand in the synagogue. In Mark's account, perhaps stemming from Simon Peter, the Pharisees simply watched to see if he would heal, so that they might then accuse him. Our Lord takes the initiative, asking the man to stand forth. He then challenges the Pharisees to answer if it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath, to save life, or to destroy it. And they refuse to speak. And our Lord looks on them in anger at the hardness of their heart. And he then heals. In St. Matthew's account, Matthew 12, verses 9 to 14, it is not Jesus but the Pharisees who ask the question if it is lawful to cure on the Sabbath. Our Lord answers by pointing to common practice with respect to animals that are in need of rescue on the Sabbath. So of course it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath day. He then proceeds to heal. Mark's account is the more graphic. With Mark there is no dialogue between Christ and his critics, and its notable feature is that Christ's anger is vividly described. In our Gospel today from St. Luke, there is a closer agreement with the account of Mark than with Matthew. In Luke, though, there are differences. Firstly, Jesus knew what the Pharisees were thinking. Luke tells us that. Secondly, while as in Mark, Jesus is described as looking around on the Pharisees after challenging them with his question, there is omitted all reference to his obvious and holy anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. Luke does not mention the anger of Christ. In our passage today from the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 6, verse 6 to 11, we are told that Jesus entered the synagogue and was teaching. That is the scene. And Jesus and the Pharisees, as do all in the synagogue perhaps, know that the man with the withered hand is present in the congregation. Consider how great a debility this would have been for one in ancient times. The withered hand may have been due to a stroke or a terrible injury or some other circumstance. It may have been his best hand too. And Luke mentions that it is the right hand. it could have been the right hand of a right-handed man. How limited he would have been in his performance of work. How limited in his ability to answer to his own needs. It was a very significant affliction, and there he was in the congregation. In the face of this human need, all the Pharisees were thinking of was that the presence of this unfortunate man would give them the chance that they are looking for. If the Galilean heals the withered hand, they have won. His compassion will have delivered him into their hands. By contrast, Christ, either having finished his synagogue discourse or interrupting it, courageously takes the initiative and asks the man with the withered hand to stand and step forward, which he does. And we know the sequel. Christ challenges his enemies to answer his question, and at their failure to do so, heals the man's hand. It is a revelation of his compassion, his power, and his undaunted courage. His critics are no match for him, and Christ is shown as never swayed by human respect or opinion. And everyone knew this too. In each of the three synoptic Gospels, the account is given of the question posed to Christ about payment of taxes to Caesar. But in their introduction to this question, they acknowledge Christ's lack of concern for a man's rank. He taught the way of God in all truth. For example, in Luke chapter 20, verse 21. In our Gospel today, these features of Christ's personality show. He is compassionate to the needy, fearless before his enemies, and he spoke the truth, whoever the recipient may be. How admirable a man! Let us place ourselves in our Gospel scene today and contemplate the person before us. Never has there been one like him before, and never will there be one like him after. In being his friend, we have every heavenly blessing. Let us not take him for granted. Let us not set ourselves against him, as did the Pharisees, understanding well that the slightest deliberate venial sin does precisely this to a point. We must fight sin and take our stand with Jesus Christ. He is compassionate, fearless, strong. As St. Paul writes, Christ loves me, and he invites me to serve him all my days.